It's 8 o'clock.
Good morning. This is Northern Light for Friday, October 6th. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe.
Emergency room visits can be stressful and often leave patients feeling frustrated by the experience.
That's the balance. Like, what is in the waiting room that I don't know? Is there a heart attack in there? Is there a stroke in there that I need to find out immediately? I think that is hard for all of us, for patients and providers.
We dig into how patients and providers see it for the next installment of our healthcare series.
We'll hear from loon researcher Nina Schock about Sunday's Adirondack Loon Celebration at the Paul Smiths College Vic. And we'll preview the new Brown Bear Ramble, a permanent art installation in Canton inspired by the book Brown Bear, What Do You See? Animals cast in bronze that have been hidden throughout the village of Canton.
They're small, so even if you know what building they're in, they might be a little bit tricky to find. There's also a map, so parents will have a pretty good idea of where the sculptures are.
And John Warren checks trail conditions for us in the Adirondacks this weekend. All of that's coming up on Northern Light. Stick with us.
Broadcast of Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio is supported by the Depot Theatre, Westport, a professional equity theater in the Adirondacks, celebrating its 45th season, depottheatre.org. And by Adirondack Foundation, making grants to nonprofits that address community issues of childcare, attainable housing, career pathways, basic needs, and more. AdirondackFoundation.org.
This is Northern Light. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe. Emergency rooms have to handle it all. Car accident victims, chest pains at 3 a.m., spiking insulin levels, broken bones, the flu, everything. Doctors and nurses triage the best they can. Patients often have to wait, and some leave frustrated they didn't get the care they expected. Catherine Wheeler reports on how both sides see the emergency room experience and what healthcare providers are trying to do to make it better.
Bill, who has a camp in the North Country, went to the same emergency room here decades apart. The first time, he had a fishing hook buried in his thumb. The ER doctor took it out, no problem. The second time, Bill was in a car that hit a deer. He had lacerations on his arms, so he went to the ER to get checked out and stitched up.
So he patched that up, and he put no antibiotic, no Vaseline, no nothing on it, and then used just regular gauze. So basically my arm and the gauze were fused for the next morning when I had to remove it, which was, to say the least, a little uncomfortable.
Bill says that experience makes him anxious about getting caught in an emergency here.
I'm at the age where, things like heart attacks and strokes are realities, and I would definitely not want to have one up in the North Country.
Lori Peterson has also had trouble with North Country ERs. A few years ago, her father, who has since died, was in and out of emergency rooms. He had prostate cancer and severe arthritis and recurring gout, and eventually he couldn't walk. Peterson says they were keeping up with his regular doctors, but he was in a lot of pain. His home health aides would tell Peterson to take her father to the ER, but when she did, they'd send him right back home.
I wish they had taken him seriously and not just said, oh, this is, this old geezer.
Peterson says those experiences left her feeling anxious, frustrated, and resentful.
I had one doctor in one of the emergency rooms say to me, I know why you're here and you're not going to get away with it, essentially. She thought I was bringing my father to dump him off and make somebody else take care of him. I was trying to get him help.
For our healthcare series, hundreds of people answered our survey about what is and isn't working in the North Country. Many of them told us about their experiences and frustrations in emergency rooms. But what is it about rural emergency rooms that makes getting the right care so difficult? It starts with people coming in too late. Victoria Koskanoya is a rural emergency doctor based in Michigan, and she's the chair of the rural section of the American College of Emergency Physicians. She says not having enough primary care doctors in rural areas contributes to who comes into the ER. According to the Economic Research Service at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, there are about 5 primary care doctors for every 10,000 people in rural areas. In urban areas, it's 8. Cascanoia says that's a problem because when people can't get regular care for chronic conditions that could be managed, they end up coming into the ER with a bigger problem.
So if somebody has asthma or diabetes or high cholesterol or high blood pressure, they might not be able to get in to see a doctor to have that managed. So then they show up when they're having their diabetic ketoacidosis or when they're having their stroke because their condition wasn't managed well.
On top of that, rural people are less likely to be able to afford medical care when they can get it. According to the Commonwealth Fund, an independent private foundation that supports health research, 10% of people in rural populations don't have health insurance, and about 30% are underinsured. So Cascanoia says patients maybe can't afford to take care of an issue when it's mild. So again, it gets more critical.
So even if there was a primary care office, if they can't pay, they might not be getting care, and they don't show up until they come to my ER at 2 a.m. when they're dying from their condition that was completely preventable.
That's true in the North Country too. Ashley Wiseman is an emergency physician in the region and at the University of Vermont Medical Center. She says she sees these situations more in ERs she works in Elizabethtown, Malone, and Ticonderoga than she does in Burlington. But Wiseman says that doesn't mean emergency rooms aren't providing quality care. She says ER doctors are trained to find life-threatening problems and then stabilize that person quickly. And they do that over and over and over again until the waiting room is cleared out.
Your experiences that were probably misdiagnosis and challenging were ones where we didn't see an immediate life threat, and that's the balance. Like, what is in the waiting room that I don't know? Is there a heart attack in there? Is there a stroke in there that I need to find out immediately? I think that is hard for all of us, for patients and providers.
She says it's frustrating for patients not to have their problems resolved when they leave the ER. But the ER isn't the right place to manage chronic conditions. That's what primary care doctors and specialists are for. Wiseman says even if she wanted to keep those patients longer, run more tests, or even follow up, she can't. That's not her specialty, and many rural ERs aren't even set up for further care.
I'm much less set up to coordinate an outpatient CT scan for a lung nodule I saw incidentally on your chest x-ray when you had a viral illness and not a pneumonia, and then follow that result and then make sure you have a primary care doctor that continues to follow that. In fact, if I write some of those orders, insurance won't pay for them.
Of all of the problems rural emergency care faces, Wiseman says transportation and distance may be the biggest enemies. The first hurdle is getting the patient to the hospital.
I might hear a radio call go out, in North Hudson or Paradox, and it might be up a smaller road. It might be by the time a volunteer, not paid EMS service scrambles a crew and gets to either one of those patients in a quite rural location down several roads from the main street and then gets them to the small hospital, to me, I could have 40 minutes.
Wiseman says not only is it hard to get an emergent patient there, getting them back home could be just as difficult.
You might need to get really creative and do things like drive a patient home yourself at the end of your shift, or really cobble together a crew of neighbors, friends, family members, because many of these services aren't there.
And in some cases, a smaller ER doesn't have the right equipment or doctors a patient needs, so they have to get transferred to a bigger hospital. ER doctor Victoria Cascanoia says figuring out that transportation isn't easy either.
Basically, I just call a hospital, a transfer number, and ask if they have the service that I need, and then wait some indeterminate amount of time for a doctor to call me back and say yes or no whether I can send that patient.
Regional healthcare networks have helped with this, but Cascanoia says she's lobbying with the American College of Emergency Physicians to standardize the transfer process. Rural hospitals don't have all of the resources and specialists of big cities. They're facing closures and slimmer budgets. Wiseman says some of the toughest days she has as an ER doctor are the ones where she knows if she had more resources or the patient had just lived in a bigger place, it would be an entirely different situation.
And I think in your worst days, you're completely bogged down by forces that you don't have control over, including things like resource limitations, transport frustrations.
But she says the best days are the ones where she uses all of her skills to help a patient, and that when she knows that person will be able to see someone locally to follow up. She says that's one of the greatest advantages of rural healthcare.
When I work at Elizabethtown in particular, where I have a really close relationship and they have a really strong primary care group, I often admit a patient to their primary care doctor. I say, oh, I'm so sorry this happened to my dear patient. I know everything about them. I will happily bring them into the hospital and fix this problem or follow up.
Wiseman says she's hopeful for the future of rural emergency medicine. She says bigger networks like the University of Vermont Health Network are working with smaller sites not only to get patients connected with doctors, but to also help teach and build the next group of rural healthcare providers. Catherine Wheeler, North Country Public Radio.
You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. It is 8:11. Good morning. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Coming up, John Warren checks trail conditions for us in the Adirondacks this weekend. Also, we'll preview the Loon Festival at the Vic in Paul Smith's coming up on Sunday. All of that and more in just a few minutes here on Northern Light.
This is Eric Pasternak out of Bloomingdale. He is part of the acoustic folk duo Blessed Dirt. And yeah, speaking of the Adirondack Loon Celebration, Blessed Dirt will perform live at the event Sunday from 1 to 2. That's at the Paul Smith's College Vic. The acoustic folk duo Blessed Dirt at the Adirondack Loon Celebration. We'll have more coming up a little later this half hour. Northern Light is supported by NCC Systems, protecting North Country businesses and homes for 50 years, offering cameras, security, fire alarms, and entry control. NCCsystems.com.
The Republican primary in New York's 24th congressional district is shaping up to be a rematch. Earlier this week, Mario Fratto of Geneva announced his plans to once again challenge Congresswoman Claudia Tenney for the GOP nomination. He's a Republican who runs his family's granite business in the Finger Lakes. Fratto ran against Tenney in the 2022 primary and lost by almost 14 percentage points. In a statement, Fratto criticized several of Tenney's votes, including her yes vote on the debt ceiling deal negotiated earlier this year. He said he's fighting for, quote, term limits, parental rights, traditional values, religious freedom, and against all mandates, end quote. NY24 currently includes the Thousand Islands and Watertown.
The St. Regis Mohawk tribe will get almost $600,000 in federal funding to plant thousands of new trees. The money comes from the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Forestry Grants Program. The tribe plans to use the funding to plant nearly 2,500 new trees across the Akwesasne Territory and strengthen a new forestry management plan. The goal is to plant 250,000 trees by 2037. St. Regis Mohawk Tribe Environment Division Director Tony David said in a statement that the project will move Akwesasne toward, quote, more resilient and healthier forest stands, end quote.
With New York's rollout of cannabis sales largely stalled, a pop-up dispensary has opened in Carthage, and it offers sales directly from local farmers. The North Country Cannabis Showcase features marijuana products from 3 regional farms. Matt Krupp of Cantera Cannabis Delivery Service, which operates the pop-up, says farmers have complained that their harvest risks going bad with the state's slow rollout of recreational sales.
They kind of heard the feedback that we had this bottleneck, that the farmers weren't able to reach members of their own communities even. And they said, hey, we'll come up with this program that will let you do farmers markets, indoors or outdoors, however you want to do them. Just partner with a retailer to track the taxes, send us a license, get approval from your town, and we'll let you do a pop-up.
The North Country Cannabis Showcase is open Wednesday through Sunday, 11 to 7 at Black River Supply Company in Carthage. It'll operate through the end of the year. Krupp says the site is slated to become a cannabis dispensary once the state's licensing system returns.
2 North Country municipalities were recently certified by the state as climate smart communities. The city of Plattsburgh and Lewis County were recognized for implementing policies and plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve resilience to climate change. Other North Country municipalities who are already certified include the villages of Lake Placid, Saranac Lake, and Potsdam, and the town of Potsdam.
And prospective students can apply for free to more than 130 New York State colleges for all or part of this month. SUNY will waive application fees for all 64 of its campuses from October 16th through the 29th. All state residents who apply to New York City's public universities as freshmen can do so for free between October 16th and the 31st. Fee waivers at private institutions vary. Many private and SUNY colleges already waive their application fees year-round. We have more information about the participating schools on our website, ncpr.org.
You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. In just a minute, celebrating loons in the Adirondacks and brown bears in Canton. That's coming up in just a couple of minutes. Then stick around after the show for Bird Note. In this episode, ornithologist J. Drew Lanham reads a letter he's written to a pileated woodpecker. That's coming up at 8:42. But first, Todd has a look at the weather for us.
It's going to start feeling more like autumn this weekend, and it's going to be wet. The Weather Service says scattered showers in the forecast today, maybe a thunderstorm, highs low 70s, and then a near 100% chance of rain. Heavy rain around the region tomorrow. And winds are going to shift to the northwest on Saturday, and highs upper 50s near 60 tomorrow. Sunday and Monday, about a 50-50 chance of scattered rain continuing with highs in the 50s on Sunday and Monday. Right now, partly cloudy skies, 68 degrees in Canton. With more of weather and trail conditions as we head into this weekend, here's John Warren.
It's been a very pleasant and dry week, but that's coming to an end just in time for the weekend, as a slow-moving cold front comes to the region that will bring widespread rain and much colder temperatures into next week when some snow is expected on the highest summits. Sunrise will be at about 6:58 and sunset at about 6:30. It will be breezy through the weekend with summit temperatures in the high peaks expected to be in the mid-50s today, cooling into the 30s Saturday and dipping into the 20s on Sunday. Wind chill temperatures on summits are forecast to be in the 20s on Saturday and single digits on Sunday. Be prepared for winter conditions if you are headed into the backcountry this weekend, and always be prepared to spend an unplanned night in the woods, especially this weekend when nighttime temperatures will dip into the 20s at higher elevations. The foliage is now near peak throughout most of the Adirondacks, except the Lake George and Lake Champlain valleys. We'll have got another week or two to go. Both High Peaks hiker shuttles are running from the Marcy Field parking area. And Fridays through Sundays through October 15th, the DEC Environmental Education bus will be stationed at the corner of Route 73 and Airport Road at Marcy Field. Waters around the region have fallen to below normal levels even for this time of year, although some local streams may rise when heavy rain is present, enough to make stream crossings more difficult. Water temperatures remain mostly in the lower to mid-60s, although they will be falling this weekend. The Spruce Mountain Fire Tower is currently closed for safety reasons. The fire tower on nearby Hadley Mountain is a good alternative. That's in the Wilcox Lake Wild Forest. And finally this week, the Clear Pond Gate will be closed to public vehicles starting October 16th until late May. From the evening of October 20th until the morning of December 4th, no hikers are allowed on the Elk Lake Conservation Easement. Those are the outdoor conditions in the Adirondacks this weekend. For North Country Public Radio, this is John Warren from the New York Almanac. Online at NewYorkAlmanac.com.
You're listening to Northern Light right here on North Country Public Radio. It's about 20 after 8. Good morning. I'm Monica Sandreski here with Todd Moe. Loon experts from around the region and the country will gather at the Paul Smith College Vic on Sunday for the annual Adirondack Loon Celebration. It's a day-long celebration of common loons, one of the Adirondacks' most fascinating icons. It's a free event that will include lectures, conversations, music, food, and a loon calling contest.
Dr. Mark Pokras of Tufts Wildlife Clinic will be the featured speaker at Sunday's event. He's been involved in wildlife care and rehabilitation for nearly 50 years, and his presentation at 2 on Sunday afternoon is titled Loon CSI, Why Loons Die. Dr. Nina Schock, Executive Director for the Adirondack Center for Loon Conservation in Saranac Lake, says the event will be a chance to update visitors about loons in the Adirondacks and some of the threats that affect their survival.
What we've seen over the years is an increasing trend in the adult population of loons. And my thought is that they were one of the bird species that were affected by DDT. Mm-hmm. And when DDT was banned in the late 70s, their population has slowly recovered, as have many other bird populations. And so anecdotally, people have said, oh, there's loons on this lake that weren't here back in the 80s. And you know, I will, through our work and through the work of the Breeding Bird Atlas, we've definitely documented that loons have expanded their range in New York, and the population has increased, and we're estimating now somewhere around 2,500 to 3,000 adult birds in the summer. But we've also documented over the last few years a decrease in the reproductive success, where numerous factors have impacted the survival of nests and the hatching of eggs, and also the survival of chicks. And one of the biggest issues that we're finding in loons now are related to climate change. We're seeing a lot of nest flooding due to the torrential rain events that we have. We've seen increase in avian diseases in the loons, secondary to climate change. We're also seeing an issue that I call molt migration mismatch, where the birds are staying too long in the winter and they've molted out their flight feathers because the big lakes aren't freezing up, and then so they're hanging out on Champlain and Lake George. And then when we get a sudden freeze up, these birds that can't fly for a month or so, they get caught in the ice. And so we've actually gotten pretty proficient at loon rescues, ice rescues in the winter. So those are some of the bigger impacts that we're seeing secondary to climate change. And we're also seeing an increase in predation of the chicks. Whereas it used to be that if chicks hatched, they had a pretty high likelihood of surviving to the end of the field season. And now we're seeing that a lot of the chicks are not making it through the end of the field season. So it's going to be interesting to see how the population changes over the next 5-10 years. As the loons live, we used to think 25 to 30 years. Now we're documenting with the banded birds that some of them are living 35 to 40 years. And as those older birds die off, we may not see enough young birds available to keep the population at a stable state.
Dr. Nina Schock is Executive Director of the Adirondack Center for Loon Conservation in Saranac Lake. That's the group putting on the Adirondack Loon Celebration. Again, it's this Sunday from 1 to 4:30. It's free. It's at the Paul Smith College Vic from 1 to 4:30. There's music, food, lectures, an interpretive walk, a loon calling contest, and a canoe raffle for a Hornbeck canoe. That's all happening at the Paul Smith College Vic on Sunday.
Also this weekend, the Remington Arts Festival is this Saturday with a few extra events on other days. This year's festival will feature the grand opening of the new Brown Bear Ramble, a permanent art installation in Canton inspired by the book Brown Bear, What Do You See? Animals cast in bronze will be hidden throughout the village.
Yeah, Emily Hastings is director of the Canton Free Library, and she told me that this project has been a big dream for the folks at the library.
We are taking Brown Bear, What Do You See by Eric Carle and Bill Martin Jr., super classic children's book, and transforming it into a series of small bronze sculptures that are hidden throughout downtown Canton for kids and families to find and mark off on a sheet, bring back and get a prize, or just enjoy as part of Canton's downtown.
Is this a bit of kind of like a scavenger hunt, sort of, in a way? Are there clues or from the books, or how do you decide, where the sculptures are placed and that kind of thing?
Yeah, there's rhyming clues in a brochure written by our own Valerie White that kids can use to kind of like hunt it down. There's also a map, so parents will have a pretty good idea of where the sculptures are. They're small, so even if you know what building they're in, they might be a little bit tricky to find. So we want it to be like a little bit of a challenge for kiddos, but also easy for parents to walk with their little ones.
Indoors, outdoors?
They are all outdoors except one. They're always visible from outside. So this is a program that people could really do anytime. In the evening you can go out for a walk and you'll always be able to see these guys, whether they're in a storefront or outside. And all kinds of weather, all seasons, they'll be accessible.
Does this become permanent public art in Canton then, in a way, or?
We hope so. The idea is that they are mounted permanently. And we want this to be really a long-term investment in Canton's downtown, that it kind of promotes walkability and family activities. We definitely hope that this will be a fixture and something that people will identify with Canton.
And this is sort of just another program that the Canton Library is doing that in some ways it draws people to the library, but then it also gets people to explore the downtown, right?
Yeah, exactly. And beyond.
Yeah.
We just put up a permanent story walk trail at the Remington Trail that has a rotating series of stories. Another activity that kind of gets kids out and walking and engaged in stories in a different way. So we see this as really an offshoot that people are engaging with the books and the stories and really getting into a classic children's book, but they're also outdoors and they're enjoying their community and the physical activity too.
You have a special event coming up to kind of unveil this project.
Yeah, on October 7th, we're having a big kickoff party with face painting and a miniature train and lots of children's activities and games. It'll be from 10 to 12 on the 7th. Our artists of the sculptures are going to be coming up to also promote an exhibit at Tawny that is in the afternoon. So this is all part of the Remington Arts Festival, which has a theme of cast in bronze this year. So it's a perfect tie-in. So we'll have like a real family fun day, and then the Tawny exhibit will feature pictures of the casting process of the bronzes. So it'll be really, highlighting those artists who've done an amazing job with this.
Emily Hastings is director of the Canton Free Library. The Remington Festival is a tradition celebrating artist Frederick Remington, who was born and buried in Canton and spent much of his life in St. Lawrence County. And again, you can check out that new permanent art installation in Canton, the Brown Bear.
If you go down in the woods today, you're sure of a big surprise. If you go down in the woods today, you'd better go in disguise. For every bear that ever there was will gather there for certain, because today's the day the teddy bears have their picnic. Every teddy bear who's been good is sure of a treat today. There's lots of marvelous things to eat and wonderful games to play. Beneath the trees where nobody sees, they'll hide and seek as long as they please, 'cause that's the way the teddy bears have their picnic. And then the
Teddy Bear Picnic or the Brown Bear Ramble. Take your pick.
Either way, it'll be a good time. Absolutely. Absolutely. We also want to remind you, too, to head over to the Brush Art Gallery at lunchtime today at St. Lawrence University. Dr. Chandray Basu will be giving a spotlight talk on the exhibit she curated, Traditional Paintings, Contemporary India, on the environment. You can find out more from stlawu.edu/gallery. And to see more about the exhibit and some of the works, you can go to our website, NCPR.org.
Also, there's a fiber art show in the Cantwell Room at the Saranac Lake Free Library. It continues through November 12th. It's really fascinating. There's a lot of great pieces on display: knitting, felting, rug hooking, a few quilts. That's all happening at the Saranac Free Library in the Cantwell Room. That exhibit is up through November 25th.
That is it for the show for the day. Morning Edition continues in just a couple of minutes. Then join us later this morning for the domestic and international news roundups coming up on 1A between 10 and noon right here on North Country Public Radio. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe. I can't get over at the Brown Bear Ramble. Okay, and the Teddy Bear Picnic. Have a great weekend and be well.
You'd better go not alone. It's lovely down in